All right, good morning again. Today, this is the June 12th Greater East St. Louis COAD briefing. For those of you who are new to the call, my name is Evan Kraus. I serve as a lead facilitator with Eastside Align. Our biweekly briefing is a touch base to share out some items that's of work that's being done through a variety of collaborative groups, all working in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. You'll see on this opening slide where our current numbers look for both the Eastside Health District footprint, which is the focus area of this COAD, as well as what it looks like countywide. And as I know Miss Linda Joyner's on the line, she always ensures we uplift that every life whose we've lost is precious, and we hold their families and our community in our prayers. And as it relates to the numbers, again, just want to show from a reflection of countywide, we're still ranging at about 3 to 4% of the total population who have been tested. So the numbers in and of itself are evident that this virus is still with us. And it's important to know that as we are seeing things reopen. Our risk is not changed, but we have greater capacity to hopefully respond. Final note about the stats, just as a reminder, if you are joining us via Zoom, you see a link that you can access data by zip code, so you can know how this is affecting your community and the communities of those you serve. Lastly, before we dive into some of the updates, as we lift up the lives lost due to COVID-19, I do want to share and convey that I know many of us on this line are also grieving the loss of a young man, a student from within District 189 who was taken from us due to gun violence earlier in the week. We are grieving alongside the school district community and all of the young people, and we are also praying for the other young people who were injured during that incident. So I just, please, as you go about your day, go about your weekend, hold those families in your thoughts and in your prayers. Without further ado, we're gonna dive into some updates to talk about the work that's happening. Again, those of you who are new, this image on your screen gives a quick snapshot overview about what this COAD is, the areas that we are working on, and I'm just excited to follow up on some of the things we shared via email about what is available. So first on the list, focusing on the education and enrichment of our young people, I'm gonna turn it over to Hannah Sherrard from the East St. Louis Youth Development Alliance to give an update about a resource, and I'm actually gonna get that ready for the screen. So Hannah, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Evan. This resource was shared out in Evan's email earlier this week, but friends and partners of the East St. Louis Youth Development Alliance put together this resource with opportunities for young people to get involved in programming this summer. We know that some programs are opening up for in-person summer opportunities, but there's also a lot of virtual opportunities on this list, as well as some activities to take home if technology is a challenge. So you'll see on here all kinds of things. Parents United for Change is coordinating some read-alouds. Join Hands East St. Louis has a college and career exploration going on each week for all teens. So I'll put this flyer in the chat, and it was also emailed out earlier this week. So feel free to share this out with young people that you know. Also, if you follow Eastside Aligned on Facebook, we're sharing out some of these activities there as well. In a couple of weeks, there will be books distributed at the Grab and Go site. So that's all of the schools in District 189, as well as several community sites. So if you know folks that are interested in adding to their libraries at home, they can stop by starting on the 22nd and pick up a book or two. So if you have any questions, drop them in the chat box. That's all we've got today.
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you to all of the organizations listed on this flyer. Hopefully my scrolling was okay and good pacing. As you can see, there's a lot of opportunities for our young people to stay engaged, and be supported during this pandemic. So that'll be dropped in the chat box, as Hannah mentioned. We've also shared a preview last week of a flyer that's being made to provide resources for folks who need someone to talk to, who might be going through all of the complexity of emotions and feelings as a result of this pandemic. And so we have a flyer both in English and in Spanish, and I'm gonna turn it over to Liz Brookshire, the St. Clair County Youth Coalition, to share about that.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I am excited to share that the St. Clair County Youth Coalition has developed a list of behavioral health resources to be distributed and shared throughout St. Clair County. And as Evan mentioned, we do have two versions, one in English as well as one in Spanish. If you are interested in receiving an electronic copy of the flyers, please let us know. If you could distribute them to your networks, that would be greatly appreciated. We certainly do want to ensure that this resource gets out to people. My vision is that it's on everyone's refrigerator, that every family has this resource and can utilize it. Again, if you see any information that we haven't included or that you think should be included or anything, please let us know, because we do anticipate doing an update. On the back of the flyer, the front, of course, includes the behavioral health resources, along with a deep breathing exercise. Deep breathing is something that is private and it's common and effective in terms of managing stress. And then on the back are the COVID testing sites. And so it just alarms me when I hear that our testing numbers are so very low. And we want to make sure that everybody has, Evan, would you mind just scrolling to the back of the page? So the COVID testing sites are there, and we want to make sure that everybody has that information so that they can utilize it and so that they can get tested. We understand that the messaging is to wait until you have severe symptoms, but with these resources available, that really isn't necessary, that if you're having any symptoms, that you can utilize these resources. So we want to make sure that people are aware of those resources and certainly utilize them. And in addition to distribution of this resource, which we want to make sure goes out throughout the county. So throughout St. Clair County, we want to ensure that this resource is available. So if you're interested in receiving this resource, please just make a note in the chat box, and I will actually put my information there. You can just contact me and I'll ensure that you get electronic copies. And some of our partners from the coalition have also made it possible for us to have print copies available for you as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Liz. And again, thank you to all with the Youth Coalition that's worked hard and had these opportunities available. And thank all of you on the phone who are going to take Liz's call to action, as well as Hannah's call to action to print these flyers and distribute where you can. And as mentioned, if there's any help needed for printing, we'll again drop our email address in the chat box so you can access it. You saw on Liz's flyers that, you know, even within the messaging of the emotional needs, we're talking about physical health in terms of how to stop the spread. We launched the I guess brother or sister initiative to prepare STL, our own version, which is Prepare Greater ESTL, which is an effort to really increase awareness about how this disease spread, to increase just that message again that it's not gone, it's still with us. But also to really be proactive in distributing PPE, personal protective equipment. And I'm really excited to share that we have some resources to get us started. I'm going to turn it over to Wivetta Granger with Community Lifeline, who's one of the leads helping to see this carry through.
Hello, everybody. My name is Wivetta Granger. Again, we've had 3 groups to go out. We have 3 teams, and they comprise of about 15 people total, and we've started the initiative to help get the PPE out to the community. So far, they've delivered over 2,000 kits, which totals about 7,000 masks, gloves, and the awareness and information materials, so, and sanitizer. So that has all gone out, and that was in the last week, I believe. That's all in 1 week's effort. Some of them, some of the places that they have covered was the Roosevelts, John DeShields, John Robinson, some of the scattered sites, and they've covered the businesses that are around those areas. We will be going out again this weekend. I think two or three of the groups will be going out this weekend. We are waiting for disposable masks to be delivered today. Hopefully we'll get them. And we had also the Stop the Spread, which is the mask that we did. This has been a joint effort with Join Hands. So we've been going out, and so we're looking forward to getting out. Our goal is to at least cover 25,000 residents within the area, within the footprint, and to at least be able to deliver the 10,000 masks, and we are well on our way. So we believe we'll be somewhere in the neighborhood of 20,000 masks when we are all done. But our goal for this month is 10,000 masks. That's my report.
Thank you, Iveta and team, and hopefully those who have the screen can see some of the folks who have been taking action. You can see young people are participating and preparing the kits. It's really an amazing effort. And you know, with all of these things, we have some folks who are playing lead roles, and but there's also an opportunity for everyone to help spread the message. So we'll be putting the materials available in the chat box as well, and just encourage everyone, if you can print, you know, let's get these messages out. And there's also the opportunity for posters. I'm not sure if we've utilized all the posters yet, but if folks have public spaces that you think would have high visibility, let us know, and we'll try to get those to you. So next up, you know, in terms of messaging, you know, those of you who've been with us throughout this journey, we've been figuring out along the way of how to best communicate. And what we've learned time and time again is that, you know, it's the work of everyone doing their part. And I know that what some folks are looking for was just guidance and support on what our messaging is and should be. And so we had a team who put together a communications toolkit, which is a new toolkit that we are going to be distributing out following this meeting. But I've asked Elizabeth Richardson to give a quick overview on what this toolkit entails. As you can see just on the slide that we have, one of the things it entails, not to steal the thunder, is graphics for you to be ready to use on your social media. So Elizabeth, can I turn it over to you?
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the introduction, Evan. So to give just a teeny bit of background about why we put this together, we've been early on meeting as a communications team and trying to figure out the best way to support all the other teams in doing their work. Initially, that looked like, oh, hey, if you have a communications need, send it over to us and we'll get it done. But what we found is that was really kind of slowing down the process and preventing people from getting messaging out. So we sort of shifted gears and really are focusing now on creating some templates and some other messaging that you all can use and just plug into whatever documents you're creating. As it says on here, like the goal is for it to be ready to use and to make sure that it's streamlining your work so that you're not having to recreate messaging that talks about the COAD every time you make a flyer or a social media post or something like that. So the document itself is relatively detailed. I'm just going to go through the different sections that it includes, and then I will include my email in the chat box. Feel free to reach out to me if you have questions, and then I'm sure we can open it up for a minute for questions on here too. So the different areas are really an overview of what the COAD is, an overview of the values that the COAD has, information on messaging around prepare greater ESTL, so that's the social distancing public health practices to stop the spread, branding information, and then the social media templates, one of which you have an example of on your slide here. Most of the information is self-explanatory. Again, it's just messaging written out that you can copy and paste into your social media posts or other documents. But one of the sections that requires a little bit more explanation is the values section. So I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about that. The list of values that we came up with really came out of conversations that we've been having both in individual teams and in the COAD as a whole. And so the goal is to make sure that we're all on the same page about, you know, these really important topics that we've been talking about throughout our time together. And the list includes racial equity, youth voice, resident voice, geographic inclusivity, and then public health around COVID-19. And so this section of the document really just gives you a definition that you can use as the foundation for your understanding for this. And then gives you a couple of prompts to think through, okay, is my flyer really representing this value? And if it's not, what could I potentially change so that it does? So again, really straightforward, just gives a few questions. It's not meant to replace training, obviously, or anything like that, but just to give everybody a few prompts to work off of. I think that's it for the content. I do want to say, just to make sure that it's clear and stated, that the goal is not to say you must use this in all communications that you're doing around COVID-19, because that's absolutely not the goal with this. Instead, it's just, again, meant to streamline your work and provide you with messaging if you need it. And then also to create some clear, concise information that people are hearing across all of this work. So the more people that are able to say, oh, prepare greater ESTL is work around COVID-19 and know that that's what it is, the less people are having to continuously explain what it is to others. So, you know, again, the hope is that this streamlines your work and it gives us some shared messaging we can use to make sure people understand our work. So, Evan, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And if there are questions, I encourage folks to utilize the chat box. And I want to point people's eyes to the chat box because there's already been some good updates being shared. You know, we only have so much time in any one briefing that we always can't cover all, but the space for the chat box is something we encourage you to put updates and information. A couple other items just to lift up, one from the chat box and one that was emailed to me earlier. As we talk about our food and other resources being distributed, previous calls, we talked about a website called Need Feed, which is a way for organizations to share information about what supplies they have and how they could be leveraged with one another. If you tune into the chat box, you'll see an update about that. So I just want to lift that up. And in addition, I'm going to just share one other document. And Melanie from the food bank, if you wouldn't mind giving just kind of 30 seconds on the SNAP benefits that are available that really we want to make sure people are utilizing. We want to give you that time.
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so this flyer, we kind of came up with it during all the COVID thing, and it kind of goes over all the different programming that we currently have going on. But I would like to highlight the SNAP portion of it. So I'm with the St. Louis Area Food Bank, and we do serve both Missouri and Illinois. Sometimes it can get confusing because the St. Louis area people don't like to put Illinois in with that. But currently for SNAP, we are able to assist clients a lot easier because of the waivers that have been put in place through IDHS. Signatures are not required for applications, so we're able to do everything over the phone. It's very quick. Everyone is currently getting max allotment until the end of the month. So like a family of one, the minimum benefit used to be $16. Now they're getting $194. So that ends the end of June. So we're really trying to encourage people to apply right now so they're able to get at least 1 month of that max allotment, since we're not sure if that's going to get extended into July. But basically, if we're just asking people to share this flyer for the Illinois number, the 618-307-9541, that's my direct line. They would call me directly. I will fill out the application with them and submit it on their behalf, and it's very easy. As well, if you want to scroll down, Evan, that's kind of the SNAP portion, but we also have food pantries, resources on our website that you can find food pantries in your area, the United Way 211 information, and then as well as mobile food distributions. We have mobile food distributions happening every day in the St. Louis, on our Missouri side and Illinois side, that a lot of people don't know about. So if you go to our website, you can see last month in May alone, we actually hit a record, and we distributed over 5 million meals, and that's the most that we've ever done in the 45 years that the food bank has been in service. So we're continuing to push out food, and we're trying to help the community as best as possible. But as always, if any of you, since you are working in the community, see any gaps that we can potentially fill, feel free to reach out to us. But our ask today is to distribute this flyer to your community network, and just to get it out to as many people as possible, just because we're kind of on a deadline of we're not sure if those policies are going to get extended into July. So we want to be able to help people as best we can, and so they can get the full benefit before the end of this month. And that's all.
Thank you for that update. And again, call to action to all, help spread awareness of these dollars that are available for the community. I see a request for a flyer in JPEG. This flyer is going to be posted on the East Side Line Facebook page, and so it'll be shareable that way. We'll work to get something beyond PDF out in an email as well. Final update before we kind of shift into a bit of kind of conversation and discussion. And that is, I've said, I think in this meeting, but certainly in meetings with United Congregations of Metro East, is United Congregations of Metro East has been holding a weekly town hall meeting on Thursdays at 1 o'clock. I refer to those meetings and these meetings as two sides of the same coin. While the COAD has focused more heavily on the distribution of the different resources, UCM, among with its partners, has been standing up in advocacy, addressing and trying to immediate remedy some of the disparities in services being available and so forth. They've been a very strong voice. I'm going to turn it over to Marie to share one way to help them continue to be a voice in our community. Marie, if you can unmute your line, and I'll share the flyer with folks.
Okay. Thank you, Evan, and thank you so much for this opportunity to speak today. I just wanted to say, first of all, that United Congregations of Metro East, when this COVID thing hit, we just really went into a strategy mode to figure out how do we, because for those of us who don't know, we're a faith-based organization, and we are called to do all that we can to dismantle systems that perpetuate racism. So when this COVID thing hit, we're used to being boots on the ground, and we had to figure out another way to organize, around issues. And so we created the weekly calls that had faith-based leaders, citizens, city leaders, decision makers, and around their response to COVID-19. And in those calls, we immediately recognized some disparities. We did not have testing centers here in East St. Louis, and so we did an action against the governor virtually, of course, and now we have 2 testing centers here in East St. Louis. We also have recognized the fact that there's an issue with broadband. There were pieces of areas here in East St. Louis and Washington Park where, even though Spectrum was giving people 2 months free internet service for the children because they couldn't go to school, there were places they could not take advantage of that because the infrastructure was not in place for them to do that. So we have taken on this fight. We are lobbying the state of Illinois to make broadband a public utility. And in doing so, that would make the companies responsible for putting in the infrastructure, just like they would for lights and water. And it would also give people who are low income access to ask for assistance for those bills, like they would do, with lights and water. So all of this stuff takes money. And so and we're not able to do our usual fundraisers. Usually we would have a banquet or, a fundraiser where we could all come together, and we can't do that here in this time of COVID-19. So once again, we have restructured, and we are doing a virtual fundraiser. It's going to be a Zoom fundraiser on June 20th. It's going to be broadcast live through our Facebook page, the UCM Facebook page. And you are able to tune in, and it's going to be like a telethon. I don't know if you guys, I'm telling my age now, if you guys remember the Jerry Lewis telethons, you just wake up in the middle of the night and there would be people on there calling and performing. So we are doing a telethon, but we're calling it a Zoomathon. And it's going to be from 12 to 2. And we're doing this in partner with our other affiliates throughout the state of Illinois. So this is a statewide initiative here. And the UCM portion is going to be from 1 to 1:30, but the entire telethon is from 12 to 2, and each affiliate has a 30-minute spot. So our spot is going to be the 1 to 1:30 spot, but you are able to donate via our Facebook page, or you can call into our office, or you can go to our website and donate, because we just have to have money in order to keep this work going. Our COVID-19 calls have now kind of shifted into in the wake of the George Floyd uprisings. We have shifted those calls now to start bringing people together to talk about what it would look like to reimagine community safety here in our area. And we want East St. Louis and St. Clair County to come together and be the model for the rest of the state about how we do this thing. How do we fix this system that's broken, and how do we restructure it? We don't want to reform it. We want to restructure it so that all of our citizens are safe, all of our citizens are protected and served. And so we're bringing the mayor. He's agreed to sit down with the mayor and the chief, and we're going to come together, and we're going to be the spearhead in this state about how we do this policing in a different manner where everybody is treated equally. So for all of that, folks, we need money. So tune in, call in for $20. We are letting you say Happy Father's Day to your dad. If you want to send us a picture and send us the name, we'll scroll his name at the end of our piece of the Zoomathon, where you can say Happy Father's Day, because this is the day before Father's Day, so we're putting that out there. Or if you want to congratulate a 2020 grad, you can do it for $20. So we just thank you again for allowing me to make our pitch, and to once again want to invite you guys to our call on Thursdays at 1 o'clock. I'll put my email in the chat if you want to be included and you're not already on the calendar invite. We'll certainly do that. And thank you so much.
I've had the pleasure of knowing Marie for 5 to 6 years now, and she has since day one been the biggest advocate for this community, her community, our community. And it's fun to see her step into fundraiser role too. I think she brings the same level of rigor and tenacity and passion. I want to acknowledge that we know that the vast majority of the organizations joining this call, we are all in a mode of seeking and needing funding. We're fortunate that both locally and regionally and statewide, there have been resources that have been available to support the immediacy of the response efforts and the direct services and so forth. We wanted to lift up this fundraiser because there are unfortunately not as many or not as large of a bench of those who are doing the advocacy work already that UCM has been doing in the community and has brought immediate impact for our community. And so I know as many folks are on the ground every day, and it's hard to know where do you plug in raising your voice while also spending all your energy connecting with services. Here is one opportunity. And some of the things Marie said about reimagining and re-envisioning what our community looks like going forward segues right into the next part of our meeting, which we're going to, if you had the chance to see the email I sent this morning, you would have already read this quote that I'm, if I can get my screen to work, put out, which I'm not going to do justice in reading, Jason, but I do invite you. I know you're already, we can see you on video. I want to thank you for your guiding us with this. For those joining by phone, I just wanted to set the stage for the conversation. Jason, in an email to folks who have engaged in the regional response team, wrote this last week. We cannot recover from COVID-19 without tackling racial equity as the centerpiece of our work. Indeed, recovery to the baseline of the status quo that existed before the pandemic is inadequate and unacceptable. It is time to finally address what decades of systemic racism has wrought and to do more than recover. Our work is to renew this region, to reimagine its possibilities, to recommit ourselves to ensuring that all are included in the opportunity to live and breathe and thrive. This encapsulates the moment we are in. It encapsulates the work that we have ahead. And you know, from the beginning of our COAD, we said, yes, there is response, but the recovery work is going to be the greater work ahead. And there is tremendous energy for that work. I'm grateful for you all to get a chance to meet Jason. There's plenty I can brag about Jason. I've known him for a long time. We have been in community together, and I've, as much calling him a friend, I still refer to him as a teacher. He brings many lenses to this work. I'm giving you a snapshot in terms of current lenses. One is as leading the regional response team, but also as someone who has really devoted his life to advocating towards changing the conditions that create the disparities. And he recently released another piece that is incredibly timely. And I asked him to join our call to give an update so folks can know how our work fits into the regional efforts going on. But also yesterday they had a call that initiated a conversation about what is the first steps towards centering racial equity and really not just paying it lip service. And so I'm going to turn the floor over to him. I'm also going to turn off the share screen so this can turn into kind of a community living room. I will say it's a starter point conversation because 23 minutes is not enough to dig into it deeper, but we wanted to set the stage for the conversations that are going to be needing to continue to happen as we build stronger community among this group of people and beyond. So Jason, I thank you for joining us. And I just turn the floor over to you to provide us with some updates and perspective.
Well, thank you very much, Evan. I'm sorry that it's taken me so long to join you on the East St. Louis COAD call. I just want to express my deep gratitude for the invitation, but also my deep gratitude for the amazing work that you all are doing. I'm sending private messages to Grace Kyung, who's also part of the community coordination team for the regional response team, saying, we need to do that. We need to think about that. We need to follow the lead of this COAD as we do the work of the regional response team. So I commend and congratulate you on the really powerful work that's happening in the Greater East St. Louis COAD. The regional response team really grew out of a need to, as Evan said, respond to this pandemic, but also to keep front and center the most vulnerable populations within this pandemic. And vulnerable populations, we know from past experience, are very often the afterthought. We'll get to that later. And that was not what we were going to allow to happen in the context of this pandemic. The regional response team, in terms of its geographic coverage, is across 5 counties. St. Charles, St. Louis, City and County on the Missouri side, and Madison and St. Clair counties on the Illinois side. And, you know, the reality is we don't often move as a region. Very often the Missouri side is not in conversation with the Illinois side. Very often we don't talk and work and move across counties. So it's been a real education, but also a real effort to try and bridge those. And I will say that Grace on our coordination team lifts up our Illinois partners at every possible juncture as we're working through our planning. And we've worked very hard to deepen those relationships, and will continue to do so. I reached out very early on in the process to Dr. Deborah Moore with St. Clair County, and we've had participation. We invite your participation on the regional response team calls that we have and host. This is not a closed system. This is open. And part of what we discussed yesterday, before I give an update on activities, I want to talk about principles. We discussed on the call that we can't sideline a conversation about racism, systemic racism, and racial equity. That's got to be at the center. And also what has to be at the center is a true and meaningful integration of community leadership, so that we're taking our guidance, we're taking our direction from the most affected and impacted communities, not just in the COVID-19 pandemic, but the dual pandemic of racism and the impact that not just our nation, but the entire world is noting in the protests that we're seeing from coast to coast and overseas as well. With the flashpoint being the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, but we know that this is not new. The conditions that created the disproportionate impact of COVID on African-American communities and other communities of color is not a surprise to anybody who's been paying attention. It was baked into the systems, and we have to reimagine those systems. So we had a very real and very deep conversation yesterday, which is only the beginning of those conversations. And we're doing some real soul searching around not just what does it mean to do the work, but what does it mean to be in relationship with each other? What does it mean to build community even as we work to serve community? But even more than that, how do we work with community and not for or to or act on community? And those are muscles that have to be built, particularly for large organizations and large institutions and those who control resources and power. I will say a couple of words on what we have been doing. We pivoted pretty early on in our process because we heard back from our partners that this needed to be action-oriented and solution-oriented. So some of the areas that we've worked in have included really with a focus, I will say with honesty, because that's where the need arose. That's where we heard about the need, was for the unhoused population, particularly in the city of St. Louis. Many of you may have seen the news about the encampments that were in downtown St. Louis. That's really was our entry point, and where we've, I think, done some really significant work is in providing for some medical and behavioral health supports for the unhoused community, including providing tablets to allow for behavioral health supports, connecting infectious diseases doctors at Washington University to some of the shelter spaces for infection control, and also looking at ways that we can institutionalize what is, again, what has been an ongoing need for the support of the unhoused population. We've also worked with our partners at Operation Food Search and the St. Louis Area Food Bank around the feeding at school sites, at library sites. We were very grateful and happy to see the allocation of CARES Act dollars for St. Louis Area Food Bank to expand its mobile sites, and worked in conjunction with our partners to put that in front of the decision makers in St. Louis County as they were distributing CARES Act dollars. We did a PPE distribution to organizations serving all 5 counties in partnership with the United Way and its volunteer center. 58 organizations received 70,000 masks. That has happened over the last 2 weeks. We put out a survey that got almost 400 organizations responding in terms of their need for PPE, and we'll be fielding another survey to make sure that we're using data to inform how we prioritize frontline service organizations receiving PPE, and we're doing our best to source additional PPE as well. We've worked in concert with the St. Louis Community Foundation and its efforts around the Regional Response Fund, and tried to help inform the distribution of those funds. Also partnered on what we've called the Homebound Initiative, which is really a network of dedicated service providers for homebound older adults and individuals with disabilities. And that is across 6 counties actually. So in addition to our counties, Jefferson County as well. And that is up and running, and we're working through that set of resources. Those are kind of the highlights in terms of activity. I know that one of our goals is to deepen the connection between the Missouri side and the Illinois side, and to make our work truly regional. So we welcome the collaboration and the thoughts, certainly of the Greater East St. Louis COAD and all of our friends and partners in St. Clair and Madison counties about how we do that. We've had some conversation with Dr. Moore and her team, but we welcome any and all suggestions about how this work is regional, and we honor your connections to the community in the Greater East St. Louis area, and truly want to direct resources and attention and care for our brothers and sisters across the river, who very often in some conversations, certainly on this side of the river, aren't at the table and aren't thought of. So just want to thank you for the opportunity to talk to you. I don't know, Evan, if you wanted to open it up for questions or.
You definitely want to open it up. I'm going to take the liberty of one question, just because, looking from a standpoint and knowing that it's in a figuring out mode as well for the regional response teams conversations. You mentioned about we can't just sidestep a conversation about how racism plays into all of this and the deep work we need to do. The regional response team call is about this size and maybe a little bit more. So it's sometimes difficult to leverage that type of conversation. And so I know yesterday's call, I had to leave early, for a good reason. I had the opportunity to engage with some young leaders who lead Leaving Our Voices Everywhere. You've got to hear from some of their young leaders' previous calls, including Remy, who I know is on our call today. So I left early on the call, so I'm curious to know any thoughts that you have going forward of how we continue a conversation with a group of this size, so it doesn't just, stop.
Well, we actually had a meeting before I got on this call with our core coordination team about offering additional opportunities outside of the large calls for people to be engaged in really not just a conversation about race and racial equity. And let me step back and kind of put on my academic and professor hat for a second. I don't think that just having conversations about, we've been having conversations about race for decades now. And that hasn't moved the needle substantially enough. We need to have conversations that center action and what can we do together, and what can we do across some of those boundaries. So what we want to see going forward, and not to get too nerdy on you, but the idea is when we look at the research from the field of social psychology, when you actually see barriers break down between people is when they're working together towards some large goal. When they have the resources and the opportunity and the infrastructure to meet each other as equals, to be in relationship with each other and to do something, not to sit around talking to each other about issues of race. And we know how those conversations often go. We talk past each other. But how do we actually show up in a different way in relationship with each other and solve some problems? So that's how we are going to be setting up some of these conversations. We understand that people are at different spaces and different places in their understanding of the ways in which systemic racism plays out. But this can't just be about sitting in circles and talking about race. We've got some work to do. And that's how we're envisioning this moving forward. And people who are willing to do that work, let's talk about what we can get done. And let's use some of the frameworks that already exist. Forward Through Ferguson and the Ferguson Commission report laid out a number of recommendations. We put out a report 6 years ago called For the Sake of All that looked at health disparities and social determinants of health. Followed that up in 2018 with a report called Segregation in St. Louis, Dismantling the Divide, with recommendations around housing. It's not as if we are at a loss for recommendations and frameworks and agendas and blueprints for action. What we're at a loss for is the action that follows up those recommendations, and the ability to have that action informed by community, and really hold those who have power and resources accountable for acting, which is why I'm so happy to see UCM and the work that it's doing around advocacy, having to be part of that discussion. This isn't just about service provision. This is about systems change. And we're not going to social service our way out of the disparities that we see. Social services are critical, but as we say in science, necessary but not sufficient to close the kinds of gaps in life expectancy and disease burden, in economic disparities and educational disparities. We've got to get beyond that, and we're going to have to work differently together to achieve those ends. That was a long answer, sorry.
It was appreciated though. And as you talked about existing recommendations, I do want to lift up the East Side Aligned roadmap that was built by this community. Over 400 people engaged, 200 of which were young people. It centers well-being of young people, but knowing that we don't get to well-being of young people without addressing the well-being of our community overall. I mean, as I scroll through the names, at least 50% of you were engaged in one way or another in building that. And I also want to lift up that many already have done tremendous amount of work advancing so many of those calls to action. So one thing to lift up, and Jason, as you share out to the region, is to know that East St. Louis, the greater East St. Louis area is a community that moves towards action, has been building the collaborative bandwidth over several years to take bolder steps and bolder action. And you hit a fundamental, one of the things you said was really fundamental, and you lifted this up in yesterday's meeting as well, is the importance of investing in collaboration. You said that, you know, we work together, barriers get broken when we're geared towards action, but when you aren't sufficiently resourced, it only goes so far. So I want to thank you for your advocacy. There were funders on the call yesterday, regional funders, and Jason called it out clearly and say, if you want this to change, you need to invest in this type of change and in the type of collaborative work. So we have a mighty group on this call, and even those who many people represent through this call. And we need that greater support. So thank you for the advocacy. I do want to open it up for folks to ask any questions. Again, we're learning. We're gonna also follow Jason and their team's lead about how we can make sure that this isn't a conversation that goes away, and that is a conversation that leads towards action. But with the time we have remaining, I welcome anyone who wants to ask Jason or myself a question.
And before we get to that question, I do want to acknowledge, and my friend Rebecca Bennett often talks about giving a deep bow. I give a deep bow to East St. Louis and the work that it has done. And I am aware of that, and I'm glad that you called it out, Evan. I sit on the Leadership Council for Ready by 21, and I've been really in awe and impressed with the work that has happened in East St. Louis. So this is a bi-directional opportunity for learning and sharing. We have things to learn from East St. Louis in terms of how to get things done. I didn't mean to step on anybody's question, though.
Welcome also.
Purnell, this is Marie Franklin from UCM. Once again, thank you for your shout out. Just a question. So with your agency, and so what would you feel like would be the best way for your agency and agencies like UCM to be able to partner with, you know, moving this regional movement forward? You know, how does that look to you, and how do you want to do that? Because we're ready. We boots on the ground, and we're ready to go.
I appreciate that. I love the enthusiasm and energy. So we're not really an agency, just to clarify. We're more of a kind of collective of organizations and institutions and representatives from nonprofit and philanthropy and government across those 5 counties. And what we want to do, actually, I want Grace and I to sit down. I think we're having a meeting with UCM coming up.
Me and Grace been talking in the chat. Okay, so we got that.
Yeah, so I want to find concrete, tactical ways that the work that we're doing gets informed by the boots on the ground that you have. That was part of the conversation that we had yesterday, was how do we shift this so that it's not a table just of service providers providing service? How do we shift this so that this is in alignment with taking the direction of truly partnering with folks on the ground who are doing the work on the ground? And how, in my mind, how do we create these conduits from that lived experience, affected community, to the people who have resources and make decisions and have influence, and use this as a platform for saying, you can't continue to make decisions in a vacuum. Your decisions have to be informed by what people are saying they want and what they need. and how do we create, given the way that we're positioned as the regional response team, because some folks are listening to us, how do we create more of that connection?
Absolutely, because I find myself, being in these calls and talking with different people, and my first thing is always saying, you guys got to buy a vowel. East St. Louis, buy a vowel. We here. We exist. We matter. So, I'm excited to hear you lift that up and know that, we're not the only ones saying, okay, buy a vowel.
I love that. We will continue to buy a vowel.
I do acknowledge the time we're at, and I can't think of a better way to close than buy a vowel as our mantra going forward. I want to honor people's time and want to echo again, this conversation's not over. And it's not only in this place, right? And the action's not only in this place. A couple of years ago, we lifted out kind of a core beliefs from an East Side Alliance standpoint about how do you, what are the commitments if you are in this movement? And we spoke to the commitment to resident leadership and voice, the commitment towards youth leadership, commitment towards public accountability, and an effort towards continuous improvement. And I want to talk about just the continuous improvement, meaning how do we know that we need to continue to learn and grow? And in these conversations and these work, it's going to take a lot of learning, a lot of unlearning and as well. And so, how we enter those spaces with grace, while also lifting up the true pain and grief that comes with it, is real. So we are going to do what we can to provide information about resources of how you can do things in your organization. Jason lifted up institutions like Forward Through Ferguson just across the river that are providing trainings now. So we're gonna look towards, with all this energy and attention to take the action, how we can best support you in taking that action in the days ahead. So want to thank Jason for carving out your time to join us. Want to thank everyone for being a part of this call today. We again will post it on Facebook, on YouTube. We'll probably post it on Facebook too, so you can share this with whomever you want, and whoever you feel like wish that they didn't miss the call, because we want to keep the conversation going. I'm gonna end the recording, but I'm gonna stick around in case there are some who just want to dialogue a bit more, but definitely want those who feel like I'm pressing against another meeting to feel free to jump to your other things. But we are gonna conclude the briefing, but hang around. So thank you all, and if those want to engage a bit more, welcome your voice.